In this video, it's the second Skyline to feature on my channel, and it's rather different to the first, which was an estate made in Australia. This is a DR30. It's an RSX Turbo C because it's got an intercooler. It's an iron mask because it's got the narrow headlamps. The Japanese like to throw names at things, but basically it's a really fast Nissan Skyline. So there we go. This is a 4-valve double overhead cam RS turbo with intercooler. The Japanese loved in the 1980s writing the spec down the doors of the car. Thankfully these are quite long doors, there's a lot of space. But in short, the R30 Skyline came out in 1981. It was the 6th generation of Skyline. The Skyline name goes way back to a company called the Prince Motor Company. They built the first Skylines. They developed the famous Hakusuka Skyline, the C10, which came out in the very late 1960s, by which time Prince had been bought out by Nissan. And Nissan kept the Skyline name going. They kept the engineering team responsible, involved with the cars. So yeah, they're kind of a company within a company. Skyline was almost separate. These R30s were introduced in 1981, like I say, and they were built and sold in Japan, Australia, South Africa even. Although I don't think they got the sporty versions like this. So the DR30 was the sporty chassis code used in this case. We've actually got a 4-cylinder engine, turbocharged and intercooled, which we'll take a look at in a moment, and this lovely coupe styling. We've got the pillarless look, which of course is slightly spoilt by having to have seat belts, and the fact the rear windows only go down that much. They can't go in entirely, but we do have, you know, the magnificent frameless doors. We'll take in the interior in a moment. First we must come around the rear of the car and take in a rear wiper. Quite unusual on effectively a saloon car in the early 1980s. Honda's Prelude also had a rear wiper. And we've got further reminders. This is a double overhead cam turbo here on the back, RSX. X is the luxury pack, I think. And the classic Skyline rear lights, the design signature. I think it started on the Hakusuka. It had 2 square headlamps, and then I think the 110 had twin circulars, and that just became a design theme right to the end of Skyline production. This one has a few modifications. It's got an HKS power boost controller and blow-off valve, and I think it's also got a piggyback ECU to unleash a few extra horses, as if it needed it. This car, when it was launched, had 220 brake horsepower from a 2-litre engine. It was one of the first cars to have sequential fuel injection. It was one of the first Japanese cars to have a multi-valve engine, 4 valves per cylinder. The technical achievements here are staggering and kind of paved the way for the R32 Skyline, which came along in 1989. And yeah, it's just an incredible tour de force, and I think we'd probably better have a look at the engine now. If I remember where the bonnet release is. That's not it, that's a flare. It's not something I'll often say. It was a flare, sorry, he's replaced it with a little mag light, which fits in the clip for a flare very well. I'm not sure why Japanese cars had flares, but they felt the need. Find the bonnet release, there we go, and the stay. And here is the engine bay. This isn't a show queen, this car. The engine bay is very honest, so you know the paint's a bit flaky in places. Here's the blow-off valve, is a phrase you won't often hear on this channel. But yes, the twin cam FJ20 engine, canted over slightly, so we've got twin camshafts and 4 valves per cylinder. Lots of space in the engine bay, quite a lot of space back here and here, because some versions of the Skyline had 6-cylinder engines, but the performance ones of this generation stuck with a 4-cylinder engine. So we've got an intercooler is down in this corner. There's a little grille down in the front bumper for accessing. You can't see it, it's tucked away in the inner wing. But yeah, it's an extraordinary car, an extraordinary technical masterpiece. You think when this car came out in 1981, British buyers were entirely happy with something as basic and ancient as a Ford Capri, with leaf spring rear suspension and none of this fancy gizmos. They really weren't into that, which is why they never made an attempt to sell these cars here. And I just think what a shame. It's a technical tour de force which would take on the might of Mercedes-Benz, BMW, This is a very impressive motor car. Let's go and have a look inside. Well, here we go. We've got the wonderful frameless doors, this beautiful red trim, nice figure-hugging seats with height control and everything. As we jump aboard, it's so very 1980s. Just look at this center console. We've got an air conditioning system, sadly non-functioning, but the controls are just beautiful. Pure 1980s. I'm sure my parents had a stereo that looked just like this. They didn't have a car stereo that looked as fine as this though. Look, we've got the graphic equalizer on this cassette player, and it's got auto reverse as well. So that's a lovely period find to make it look correct. We've got Van Halen. So there we go, we can listen to some Van Halen later. Down here we've got, this is the boost controller, and it's got the scramble button. That button is actually back here. It's your overtake scramble boost button. So this is like Kit out of Knight Rider. We've got a power boost. I'm pretty sure it won't make it take off. The window switches for the windows here, but there's also one on the driver's door. So we've actually got two windows for that. There's a little turbo timer down here as well. That's a more modern thing. That looks a bit more modern. So you got a turbo timer, so you can have the engine run and let the turbo cool down if you've been giving it some hammer. But we've got cruise control as well. We've got the button for that on the indicator stalk here, and that's where the lights are on the end. That's your indicator stalk. Electric mirrors, electric windows, electric everything really. Headlamp washers, windscreen wiper on the back, the old hazard lights, and that switch double functions. It's a parking light switch as well. And I'm just going to borrow the camera to show you this angle. It's very similar to the Laurel and the 280C at the time. When you adjust the variable intermittent, it actually moves this little diagram to show you how varied your wipers are. But yeah, a sea of orange here, and on the main dials, the classic Nissan graph paper sort of interface, and this sporty 3-spoke Skyline steering wheel, but a gear lever that looks like it was taken out of a Nissan Bluebird. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, you have to say, but very comfortable in here. There's even a thing here that tells you when the doors open. This is stuff I'm just not used to. But I've just remembered another gadget, and it's this gadget. Oh yes. And my camera lady is going to have to jump back out so we can demonstrate what that is. So this little gadget here allows you to change the angle of the aerial. I'm not sure why, but it's delicious things like that. Lovely Japanese touches, but I find so endearing. I'm going to try and jump in the back, so let's see how this goes. Oh, squeeze in. Oh, it's not too bad, actually. Ah, but the seat doesn't reset. That can often be a problem on Japanese cars. Is that a head? Oh, no, that's how you get out. Oh, I see. So you've got a release button on the side to release the seat. That's quite good, but actually it's quite spacious here. The seat is just a bit short and a bit low down for my liking. It looks like we've only got lap belts, but they tuck away quite nicely down there. Skyline, symbol of quality since 1957. That's how far back it goes. And it looks like the switches for these rear windows are missing, so you have to beg and plead for ventilation if you're sitting in the back. But yeah, that's not as bad as I thought, although my head is touching the rear window. Weighed down by this lovely rubber spoiler. There's a high lip, but actually a fair bit of space in here. There's a fair bit of room. We've got a skinny space saver tyre. We've got magnetic GB badges, and that takes me back to following this car around the Netherlands 2 years ago when we went to the most excellent event, Japan Classic Sunday. Absolutely superb event. I don't think it's happening this year. But if it's on next year, I will very much hope to be there. But yeah, it's a surprisingly practical coupe, really. It's not just about going quickly, but I think it's about time we probably did. Something I've only just noticed, I should have got in the back this side, because I think this seat is probably better set up. But there's a little door handle this side, so you can open the door from the rear seat. That's a delicious little touch. And a little curbside light that sadly isn't working. Apologies for sandals. Another detail I forgot, it's actually got selectable shock absorbers. The Japanese were obsessed with these and even fitted them to 4x4s and everything. This has had replacements, so they're no longer functioning. We're not too sure what's been done to the suspension. It seems to be sitting a little bit lower than perhaps it would from the factory, but nothing has been done in this country other than Fergus rebushing it and repainting all the components fairly recently, I believe. But here we go, we'll start the engine up. And you know, a fairly purposeful but definitely 4-cylinder soundtrack. The exhaust, non-standard. We shall pop into reverse. Oh, I'm getting way away from myself here. Windscreen wipers. Oh yes, a most excellent pattern there. And will they then park off the screen? Yes. So that's very, very good Japanese quality. The actually wipes a bit low, but we've got no triangle of doom and good overlap. So that's all good. We're going to try the rear wiper as well. So do you want to take a look rearwards? Oh, there we go. That's a really nice little wiper pattern there. Oh, quite liking that. And yeah, you can click through on the switch to get more screen wash. So apologies to all people who lend me cars. Your car will be covered in screen wash after a hub nut test. So just pottering around, it just feels like well, a bit like a firm Nissan Bluebird. It's not yet feeling exciting, but these cars were based on the Laurel platform, but with a much sportier edge. Whoa! Bit of second gear synchro mesh there. Yeah, Bluebirds don't do that. Hear the blow off valve having a good old shout about. As cool as the windows are, maybe we should do them back up again.
A little, yeah.
Are you getting a little windswept there, little camera lady? Right, before we get back to the dual carriageway.
Definitely before the dual carriageway.
Yeah. But yeah, it's fair to say performance is somewhat brisk. I mean, that specific output is over 100 brake horsepower per litre in the 1980s. The Turbo C came out in 1985, I think, right at the end of R30 production, but it's an astonishing amount of power, and it kind of hints at what is to come, because the Japanese were about to get properly rowdy, you might say, with their own little power battle. Subaru, Mitsubishi, Nissan, Toyota, they were all gunning to have the most powerful car, despite a gentleman's agreement of 280 brake horsepower. Many cars, especially by the mid to late 90s, were pushing out considerably more, or could easily be tuned to take a lot more, so the running gear was designed very much to cope. But we'll go and get on a dual carriageway where we can properly unleash this car. But yeah, the ride is crashy. It's not my cup of tea, but understandable given the amount of power it's got to try and rein in. Just hear the turbocharger just giving a little hint of mischief, but let's go and see how we go. Oh yeah, second gear synchro mesh, not the most happy. Jeepers, that's R70 in fairly short order, even with my rubbish slow gear changes. It's a little bit revvy at speed though. We're doing an indicated 70 and it's getting on for 4,000 revs, so it's very much geared to keep that turbocharged engine on point, on boost. I think we'd better go and do that again, don't you? Did you enjoy that, dear?
Yes, dear.
Oh yeah, second gear synchro mesh is not feeling entirely happy, unfortunately.
We're going to do it in this one.
Oh, we did a few in the Toyota earlier, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah, that's mama upsetting power for sure. And we decided to drive this car after the Toyota Corona, so you will have seen the Corona test. If you haven't, you must go and see it, because we wanted to show the march of progress, how rapid it was with the Japanese. So that 1960s Toyota is not that powerful as it was from the factory. That one had been modified, but the road manners were just sloppy. They weren't superb. Well, they weren't even all that good. It was very, very twitchy and slightly behind the times in technology terms, because the Japanese car industry was only just getting started. Move on almost 20 years to when this car was built, and you know, the Japanese are ahead of the game here. I think there's probably more power on tap here than a Porsche 944 turbo, and that's got a considerably larger engine, still 4-cylinder. Out the way, Mr. Tesla. But yeah, this feels a lot more assured. Oh yeah, that's a very enjoyable amount of power. Says Mr. Power, less is more. But it's how good the car feels as a whole that's the really surprising thing here. Like I say, the Japanese were not one to hit a successful formula and rest on their laurels, if you'll pardon the Nissan pun. They were always seeking to improve. And this was the biggest wake-up call yet to the Western world. I think there was a certain assumption that the Japanese just made really boring hatchbacks and weren't much to worry about, but couldn't have been further away from the truth. Yeah, the mid-range punch is extraordinary, but it's also a well thought out car. I've got somewhere to rest my clutch foot. The driving position is excellent, the seat comfort is good, and it doesn't seem all that laggy either. You don't have to wait too hard before that power is really punching you down the road. Wow, that is not a very hub-nut car, but a very enjoyable one. All the same, the power delivery is just extraordinary, but then the whole car is extraordinary. There is technology here that frankly urinates all over the European cars of the time, and it really does demonstrate just how far the Japanese had come, and that they were starting to become the builder of some very, very exciting cars. Sadly, cars we didn't see in the UK. These cars were never sold here. And we only have a few imported cars to enjoy, and that's a bit of a shame. More of these around in Australia and South Africa in saloon and estate form, but yeah, that's a very striking motor car, and in many ways the performance, yes, it's strong, but unlike the later Skylines, the R32s, the GTR name coming back, they had so much power you can barely tickle it out on an open road. You can enjoy a good third gear blast in this and not have to worry about your license too much, so all the more to enjoy. So yeah, very interesting and a very quick car. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the Hubnut store if you wish to support the channel, and there are other channels to check out as well, Hubnotes and Miss Hubnuts channels, so go and check those out if you fancy something a bit different, a bit of behind the scenes, a bit of Welsh history. And we shall see you in another video. Farewell. The washers don't work.
Oh, sad times.